The Montreal Canadiens just made a signing that could bring some huge changes in the future. Samuel Montembeault signed to a 3-year extension with Montreal changes a lot of this team and their future. And in my opinion, it could bring a couple of trades that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So what is this Montembeault signing? How good is it? And what changes could it bring in the future for this Montreal team? Well, make sure you watch till the end for all the trade rumors and all the news talk. And hit that subscribe button if you're new for more Montreal and hockey content just like this all throughout the year. Now, as a pending free agent, Samuel Montembeault's situation with Montreal was kind of in flux. We didn't know if he was going to get traded, if he was looked at as the goaltender for the foreseeable future. We really had no clue. But then out of nowhere, the Montreal Canadiens would announce a 3-year contract extension with Montembeault, which would solidify him as a starter for the next 3 seasons. You go on to the announcement here by Frank Cervelli giving us the actual contract details. 3 years for Montembeault at a $3.15 million cap hit. Now, what's interesting, and we'll also touch on this a little bit later, but Chris Johnson saying 3-year extension, $3.15 million AAV. We know that already, but he says there are no trade restrictions in this contract. And to me, that's pretty important. If the Habs knew he was going to be the starter for sure over these next 3 years, then they would give him some sort of trade protection to make sure the player is a lot more happy. Maybe even get that AAV a little bit lower because of that, but no trade protection on this deal at all. And I'm thinking maybe in that 3rd year, Montembeault actually might be available, especially if some of these Habs goalie prospects improve faster than we thought. But let's talk about Sammy and, of course, what this contract means for the Habs and their future. Now, it's interesting, of course, because Sam Montembeault turned 27 this last October, so he'll be 30 years old when this contract is over. You can see at 6'3", 198 pounds, it has been absolutely bananas to watch his development. You can see how he's progressed going from the Florida Panthers system and being an abysmal goaltender in 2019, 2020, then going into Montreal system and seemingly finding a lot more consistency. He wasn't amazing in 2022, but in 2023, he was really starting to show great signs. It was one of the best goalies in terms of goals saved of expected with a .901 save percentage in 40 games. Getting a .901 last year with the workload he had last year was pretty impressive. Then you go to this season in the 10 games played mark, he has a .270, 3 goals against average, and a .910 save percentage. And even though Montreal's gone a little bit better defensively here, Montembeault has still been incredibly impressive. And there's been a couple of off games here and there, but really season-wide, he's still been great and still been the Montembeault that we saw last year. But to me, the performance that we've seen so far this year was incredibly important. Last year was his best year by far in any pro league, and to see him replicate that success, and not just replicate it, but look solid and look consistent too in his 3rd year of Montreal, that was so important to getting him as really a mainstay on this Montreal team. If he was going to be a core part of the goaltending for the future, he had to show that last year was not a fluke. And it seems like even though we are early into this season, that Montembeault has gone right off where he left off last season and is still at a great level. You can see how many years he was in the QMJHL, then the AHL, trying to break into the NHL, trying to look as good as he could and couldn't find any consistency with Florida. But then in his 2nd year of Montreal, at age 26, was able to come in and be this great goaltender, steal games for the Habs. This is a goaltender that went through so many years of being mediocre and poor in the NHL level, and now he's finally starting to find his footing, and he's gone to payday because of it. Over $9 million over the next 3 years, and boy, I just love seeing stories like that. If you told me back in 2020 that Montembeault would be getting a 3-year contract extension at $3 million AAV, would have never guessed that. But you got to give him credit, man. You can see the work that he's put in it, and you can finally start to see that adaptation into the NHL level, and the Montreal Canadiens are reaping the rewards of it. Now, here are some NHL goalie stats from the start of the 2022-23 season, and since then, in terms of 5-on-5 goals saved of expected, you can see Montembeault is 7th in the entire NHL with a 21 rate. That is incredible over these last couple of years, and you can see he's in that range of players like Demko, Vasilevsky. You got players like Swayman, Shesterkin, Ullmark. He has been unbelievable, and at 5-on-5, one of the best goalies in the league these past couple of years. And when you put it to all situations, including shorthanded, Montembeault hasn't really been downgraded that much either, as the 9th best goalie in terms of goals saved above expected. So basically, over the past 2 seasons, Montembeault has been a top 10 goaltender. Getting him for $3.15 million, I mean, to me, that's a steal if he's going to keep playing like this. Now at 5-on-5, Montembeault continues to be one of the best goalies in the NHL this season, and this is just this year's stats. I guess you can see 10 games played, and he has a 7.2 goals saved above expected at 5-on-5. He's 20th in terms of all situations, so being shorthanded has definitely hurt him a bit, but Montembeault has still been at 5-on-5 at even strength one of the best goalies in the league these past couple of years, and he just is consistent at it, which you love to see. So again, if Montembeault is able to keep this type of performance, the fact that they're getting him at $3.15 million is incredible, and he doesn't really show many signs of aging or anything. Right now, he's in the prime of his goaltending career, and that is fantastic to see. If he's able to continue that stretch, that 5-5 dominance, then he'll continue to be one of the best goalies in the league, simply put. And the fact that Habs only got him at $3.15 million without any trade protection is pretty incredible. And if they do decide to trade him, then it's a lot easier to, with that low cap hit still at 3.15, and of course that no trade protection. I think a lot of teams out there would want to have Montembeault, and especially if they want some stability. I mean, Montembeault has been great the past couple of years, and that term could be really enticing. But here's the thing, I don't think Montembeault is going to get traded. The real reason why I think Montembeault's signing is so important is because of the other goaltenders on the team and the trades that we will see because of it. But you already know who I'm going to mention. Let's go on to Jake Allen, who will be traded because of this Montembeault signing. At 33 years old, the time of trade, Jake Allen probably should have been a couple of years ago, but even though his save percentage numbers haven't been incredible over these past couple of years, I still think there is value there potentially. Now again, those counting stats haven't been especially pretty under Montreal's system, but they've been okay, and in terms of goals saved above expected, he's actually still been pretty decent. As much as that term could make a player like Montembeault very tradable, it makes Jake Allen almost impossible to deal. You see, with a cap hit at $3.85 million, this is a goaltender that is a little bit too expensive, and with the term might be a little bit too much trouble for a lot of teams. You can see what his contract looks like right now at a $3.85 million cap hit for this year and next, but you also, of course, have that modified no trade clause, which really makes things interesting for Montreal. It makes things especially hard. Now, it's not an especially huge trade clause. It only features 7 teams, but that's a decent chunk of the league still. That's a lot of teams that Allen could not be traded to, and it could be some Canadian teams too that might want a goaltender that just simply can't have him. But you combine, of course, that extra year, which makes things shaky, especially at Jake Allen's age. You combine the shaky performances he's really had the past couple of years and that modified no trade clause, and he's gone from a goaltender that should have been very easy to trade to one that's been almost impossible to. I think if he had 1 year left on his deal, the Edmonton Oilers would have come in running to get Jake Allen, and who knows if Edmonton's on his no trade clause either, but that's a team that I think could especially have a lot of interest in Allen if it weren't for the complications of the cap. Now, obviously, Edmonton is always going to be having complications with the cap. Montreal can't control that, but still, they've put themselves in this hole of Allen having that extra year, which has really hurt them. Still, though, I think the fact that the Habs have extended Montembeault for as long as they have really shows confidence that they can deal Allen in the end. But that becomes the problem, is that you have teams like New Jersey who could be a fit, but again, is Jake Allen much better than a Vitek Vanacek or an Akira Schmid at this point? I don't really think so. Maybe an upgrade short term, but I'm not sure if he's going to be the guy that gets you to the Stanley Cup and wins it for you in the end, even if there is some much needed experience that could be gained there. You start to go around the league, see teams that could use goaltenders and be like, oh, but that team might not want that extra year. Carolina especially is a team that I think could really use Allen this year, but I don't think would want to have him for that year afterwards. So it really creates a lot of complications for Montreal, and even though it should be a slam dunk of a trade to make, it's become a headache for them. But still, I do see a Jake Allen trade happening in the end, happening sometime this trade deadline, and to me it makes sense. With Montembeault, he has proved to be a player that can come up in big situations, look good 5-on-5, and be a stabilizer in net for Montreal. And even though Primeau has had some good games and some bad games, just like Allen, I think he has showed that he could have a responsible 20 more games or so in him this year, and I think you might as well try him in that position, give him some backup games, and if you'll lose games, who cares? You get a better draft position. It is what it is. I think with what we've seen the past couple of years, the Montreal Canadiens deserve to finally lose some games because of their goaltender, man. The Habs have been carried because of players like Montembeault and Allen being way better than they should, simply put. But I do like this signing a lot from Montembeault, especially because that term to me is pretty much perfect. You don't keep him too long after 30. If you still think he's fair for that value, if you still want him on the team, then you can extend him another time after that. I think giving too much term, 4 or 5 years to Montembeault, would have been a mistake. You give yourself enough flexibility with Montembeault where if he doesn't live up to the contract expectations, it's fine. You aren't going to be truly contending over these next 3 years anyways, and you have some great young goaltenders coming up too, where if that 3 years works out, if Montembeault is is a good stopgap, then you'll have guys coming up. Like we talked about all throughout draft season in 2023, to me, Jacob Fowler was the best goaltender in the draft, and the Montreal Canadiens got him in the 3rd round. To me, in 3 years' time, of course, 3 another seasons after this time, I think Jacob Fowler could be potentially ready in the NHL, or at least knocking on the door. To me, he has been brilliant for Boston College, a .921 save percentage in 14 games. He's been living up to expectations as a 19-year-old goaltender. He is the future in net for this Montreal team, and hopefully Montembeault will be, again, the perfect stopgap between then and now. And it's not like Jacob Fowler is the only guy. You got Jacob DeBrincat, who I think could be in a really solid, maybe fringe starter position by the time that Montembeault's contract is done. He'll be 25 by the time it's over, but at 6'4", he's a player that's been getting adapted to the AHL level, is slowly getting there, even though this season hasn't started off greatly for him. But he's a goaltender that I think as a backup could be in that position in 3 years' time and could be perfect there. And you also got other goaltenders who they selected in the 2023 draft that I like quite a bit. In the 5th round, you got Evgeny Volunkin, who has been fantastic in the MHL level this year, and .939 save percentage in 16 games, which is to be expected of him, but still, he has looked pretty good and is still 18 years old. He's definitely a lot more of a long-term project, but hopefully it'll be Fowler as the starter and then Volunkin as the true next generation backup goaltender. But Montreal has drafted a lot of goaltenders over the past couple of years, so a few of them will work out. I know Fowler will, but they'll have a lot of options coming up throughout the system that hopefully once Montembeault is past them, they'll have coming up in the right positions. Because I know there were a lot of people confused why Montreal was drafting so many goalies the past couple of years, but it makes sense. You have a plethora of options and a ton of guys that could reach up to their potential, and I think especially guys like Fowler and Volunkin are fantastic picks. Dobich could be really interesting as well as a backup. For Montreal, it brings them so many more options within the prospect pool, and I think for Montreal, they're using that quite well. I think this deal shows both the confidence and kind of the lack of confidence that they have in Montembeault. The confidence that he will be a great goaltender over the next couple of years, but maybe not the generational starter of the future that they need. While Fowler, I think, will eventually be that, they put Montembeault in a position to be solid over these next couple of years, but of course, once he naturally ages, he'll probably start getting a lesser role on the team and lesser contracts. For Montreal, I love how they've developed their goaltending. I love how they've progressed with their goaltending in the prospect pool, and right now I'm loving how it's progressing too. Getting Fowler in the 3rd round continues to be a steal every single day, and thankfully the Habs are going to reap the rewards from that. But again, I would not count out a Sam Montembeault trade in the future. Still, there could be a situation where maybe teams like to have that churn with a player like that, like to have that low cap hit and maybe go after him in the offseason. I definitely don't think we're going to see a Montembeault trade this season, but I think maybe in the offseason, maybe early on, right before next season, we could see Montembeault potentially dealt, but if he is going to get traded, it's most likely on that 3rd year, when he could really be an addition for 1 season as a rental to a contending team. To me, Montembeault still has a lot of value, probably would have gotten a lot of value in a trade this year, but I can see why they stuck with him. At some point, you got to have somebody that can play goaltending, especially with Allen likely out the door, and Montembeault is a fan favorite. He's going to be solid, going to be consistent, and going to be what Montreal needs as they really go into the future, into this next era of Habs hockey. But let me know what you guys think of the Montreal Canadiens and their recent signing in Sam Montembeault, the recent 3-year contract extension. What do you guys think this means for the Habs' future? Do you see the goaltending changing in a big way? Do you see a Jake Allen trade, a Cayden Primeau trade? Who do you think is the starter of the future? Would you still ride high with Montembeault? Do you think Jacob Fowler will live up to expectations? And what do you think of players like DeBrincat and Volunkin in the system? Do you think they'll be good enough to reach the NHL level? Let me know all your thoughts down below. Of course, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you enjoyed today's video and want to see more like this all throughout the year, because you won't want to miss a thing, folks. And of course, share a video with all the hockey, all the Habs fans you guys know online, and click on this card for all of my prospect talk, or actually trade rumor talk, right in one playlist. And I will see you in the next one. Drink some water, have a great day, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.